Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tom Fitton, president of Judicial Watch, here with our weekly update on Facebook Live. A lot going on this week, as always, at Judicial Watch, which is your anti-corruption watchdog here in Washington, D.C. We're here to talk about the Clinton emails, a new Judicial Watch lawsuit on State Department records keeping that have a lot to do with the Clinton emails, and also an astonishing story, probably an unsurprising one, but still astonishing one out of the Obama administration about its efforts to get citizens naturalized in order to affect the outcome of the November elections. And of course, it wouldn't be Facebook Live without a promotion of our great new book. I know what the title, I just want to check it. Clean House, Exposing Our Government Secrets and Lies. Thanks to you all, it's now a national bestseller. It's number 4 on the Publishers Weekly list, nonfiction list. Now, despite being the 4th biggest book in the nation on the nonfiction hardcover side of the ledger, the New York Times still hasn't put it on its bestsellers list. And as you know, the New York Times bestsellers list is pretty important. We can't force them to do it, but we can make it impossible for them to ignore us. If more of you purchase the book, it's probably less than $20 in most retailers, Amazon, elsewhere. Go to your local bookseller. That will have a big impact as well. Purchase the book. Don't let the New York Times ignore us. You can guess probably why they don't want to put this book on the bestsellers list, but ideology should play a role here, and the market should, and to the degree we can make the market so hot for this book, the New York Times will have to put us on the New York Times bestsellers list. Our first book, Chronicles, was already put on the New York Times bestsellers list when it came out a few years ago. This, again, is a national bestseller. It's on all the bestseller lists except for the New York Times list, and that can change still if those of you watching and listening now go out and get the book. And you'll see when you read the book why the New York Times and maybe some liberals don't want you to know what's in it, and why they don't want to give it more attention, because it details the IRS abuse, the key background in the Clinton emails, great information on election integrity, which we'll talk about soon, and the crisis on our border and the dire threat that crisis is causing for our nation's security. I told you last week about the Clinton email find admission by the State Department that there were Benghazi-related emails on the deleted emails that Mrs. Clinton tried to keep away from the American people, but the FBI was able to recover. She deleted about 30,000 emails. The FBI recovered about 15,000, turned them over to the State Department, and they found some Benghazi emails. Well, they finally gave them to us this week. I won't bore you with the legal back and forth there, but there was gamesmanship, as you might imagine, and it turns out the 30 emails they released, they said it's not really 30, there were only 3, and the 3 they released were relatively unremarkable. There was one branded new document in the sense that it hadn't been produced at all before, and it was a document praising Mrs. Clinton. And 2 other documents, there were three of the documents they released. 2 other documents were what the government called near duplicates. Again, a new made-up phrase to mask the fact that they're brand new records. And essentially there were email forwards that were printed out or sent along by Mrs. Clinton, and which is a brand new record. You send an email to someone, and that person sends the email along. That's a new record. And the media would have you believe only one new document was found, when the headline is, we have confirmation there was Benghazi-related material Mrs. Clinton and her lawyers deleted. And as you know, all of that was under subpoena. Should have been produced in our cases and things like that. So, I don't know how many cases how many facts you need to push a case for obstruction, but certainly the fact that these Benghazi emails were there at all shows you that at least in one instance there were materials responsive to subpoenas that were not sent and produced but were deleted by Mrs. Clinton. And in a few weeks, on September 23rd, the whole bunch of documents, the 14,900, the government's going to have to come in, the Obama administration, explain how quickly they can get them to us. Now, there was a hearing earlier this week over in the House. They talked about our case, I'm sure. I wasn't in town here, but I understand that was the case. And the State Department said it would be impossible for them to get this out before the election. And as you and I both know, that's a load of bunk. If they want, they can do anything they want to. This government can, in terms of getting these documents released. They've had them since July, and there's no good reason not to have them all released and reviewed under the Freedom of Information Act prior to November 4th. And the fact they haven't done it and they're trying to pretend they can't shows you just how corrupted this administration has been in its and how much of a co-conspirator it is in the illegalities related to Mrs. Clinton's illicit email server. And along those lines, the stonewalling from the State Department still continues. We had to file a new lawsuit this week on something relatively straightforward. There was this Office's Inspector General report about Mrs. Clinton's email use. It was pretty critical. Yet the and in the email and in the OIG report, they referenced the fact that the State Department, even before Mrs. Clinton came into office, didn't want to tell her or anyone else in the staff about the rules requiring that federal records be printed out and filed. So this is the way it's supposed to work. Not all emails you create at the government level are necessarily, quote, a federal record. And those that are federal records, which essentially, the law speaks for itself with my layman's understanding of it is, it documents a significant government action or decision or activity, needs to be printed out and filed. Now you can imagine that law is not followed the way it's supposed to be followed, and the State Department, rather than follow the law, didn't even want to tell anybody in the State Department about it, according to this document from the Office of Inspector General. And their email communications about that, and we asked for those, and the State Department, we're talking about one or two email communications, according to the OIG report, didn't want to turn them over to us and hasn't responded to us. We asked for it back in June, and it's now September. Under the law, they probably should have responded probably in July, and now we're suing again. Again, the OIG report says the Department of State has this email exchange, again, one email exchange, that demonstrated a reluctance to communicate the requirement of printing and filing email records to incoming staff. So the Clinton scandal is also an Obama administration scandal. Don't forget it, because it was the State Department under President Obama. Mrs. Clinton had a lot to do with it, but it was the Obama administration that played fast and loose with the records. And to this day, there could be thousands, if not millions, of records lost to you, the American people, about what this State Department has been up to. Great story this week, getting to election integrity. I know folks are concerned about that. Just so you know, we don't take a position as to who you should vote for or against. But we do think elections need to be free and fair in the sense that fraud should be frowned upon, and the federal government shouldn't have its thumb on the scales. Now, the Obama administration, in an effort to support Democrats, evidently, has been spending your money in an extraordinary program, which is called, I think, what is it called? It's called the Task Force on New Americans. Forgive the pause. Task Force on New Americans. And what it is, it's a Democrat registration program. I mean, that's clearly the perspective. They see those eligible to become citizens here in the United States as being ripe for picking for Democratic candidates. So they're spending tax dollars to accelerate their citizenship application status and make it more widely known and available, and help others and use your tax dollars to help mostly left-wing organizations help residents eligible for citizenship, or perhaps ineligible for citizenship, which is the concern, become citizens, naturalized citizens, before the elections and vote. So to be clear, there's this $10 million program that they're spending just recently. They spent $63 million since 2009 on this. And they give grants to these Acorn Group type organizations to help these non-citizens become citizens. Now, there's this desperate effort to get it done before the election, and when there are desperate efforts to kind of rubber stamp, it looks like, these citizenship applications, that's where you get the recipes for fraud. And it reminds me of the Citizenship USA program, and you should Google this one, under the Clinton administration, where there was this big effort to help Bill Clinton's re-election campaign run by Al Gore, and they were registering, trying to get citizenship applications stamped through, again, to help with the Clinton re-election campaign. And as a result, millions of, I think like 1 million plus background checks as required by law weren't done. So these are the concerns we have here. You know, if you can become a citizen, more power to you. We encourage those here benefiting from the American dream, who share the American dream, to become citizens. But to take tax money to dole out to leftist groups in an effort to get them become citizens just so that they can vote, presumably to help Democrats, seems to be a suspicious process. So we highlight that on the website this week as well. So there's a lot going on here at Judicial Watch. Next week we've got new material coming out about the IRS, new material coming out about Clinton emails, and the State Department's connivance with the Clinton gang on that. You'll be interested to learn about that. But I encourage you to look at the weekly update this week. A lot of important news. And just before I go, we did look at the FBI materials that were released in the FBI 302 of Mrs. Clinton. And that document confirms our initial criticism of the FBI. They let Mrs. Clinton off the hook. There are many crimes related to obstruction and the maintenance and destruction of federal records and the violations of the Freedom of Information Act, which weren't followed up on. There was attorney-client privilege asserted to prevent the FBI from asking about the destruction of government records, yet the FBI didn't follow up on it, and the Justice Department didn't follow up on it. So it doesn't augur well, given this corruption and cover-up evident in these documents, for any future criminal investigation, at least from this FBI or Justice Department. I know the Congress is asking for something because they don't want to do anything. And you can bet nothing's going to be done. It's going to be up to Judicial Watch to figure out what went on and to get answers from the Obama administration and from Mrs. Clinton directly. Recall, we're waiting on Mrs. Clinton to respond to our questions under oath, the questions we submitted. She'll have to respond under oath, in a written format. They were due September 29th. She sought 2 more weeks, so now they're due October 13th. So within a month or so, we should be getting those answers. And some of those questions are going to be very pertinent. And we didn't know what the FBI asked her, but it looks like we have some of the same questions. So it's a very interesting situation we're in. Mrs. Clinton still has to go under oath again on the Clinton email matter. More Clinton emails are coming out. More have come out. More lawsuits have been filed. And of course, we've got this issue, again, with immigration and elections. So think about that the next time you hear rigged elections. Remember that Judicial Watch reported the $63 million being spent by the Democratic administration in an effort to impact the elections by naturalizing as many citizens as possible. The rules be darned, by giving a bunch of money to left-wing groups to help organize leftist prospective citizens to vote in Democratic elections, vote Democrat in the elections. And nothing wrong voting Democrat in elections, but let's not use our tax dollars to help one party versus the other. So thanks for paying attention. Have a great weekend. And of course, if you have any questions, reach out to us directly and get our email updates where I talk about this in greater length at judicialwatch.org, judicialwatch.org. Thanks again.